In the wake of the ceasefire, everybody wants to know who won between the two warring sides. It is a valid question because our mindset has been shaped this way by previous wars. As far as I'm concerned, there are no winners as of yet, except perhaps major powers like China, which has so far sat this one out. In fact, my argument today will show that both sides have lost so far and that they have lost in ways they cannot deny. The US, in collab with Israel, demonstrated overwhelming air dominance, executing precise and sustained strikes that degraded infrastructure and systems, while applying immediate pressure in a way only the US can. I believe in giving credit where it is due. The strikes were fast and efficient, and significant damage was clearly done. But the real question is whether this translated into control, because this is where the idea of victory begins to unravel. Despite the scale and sophistication of the strikes, there was no capitulation or imposed political outcome that can be clearly traced back to that display of dominance. The machinery of degradation worked, but the machinery of decision did not follow. What we are left with is pressure and damage without closure or resolution. On the other side, Iran absorbed significant blows, and it would be disingenuous to pretend otherwise. There have been heavy losses of life, and infrastructure has been reduced to rubble. The cost is real. Yet, despite this, the regime has not collapsed, and its negotiating position has not evaporated. It entered the ceasefire still holding leverage, and this is where the illusion of victory becomes most visible. Because if one side can dominate militarily without forcing a decisive outcome, and the other side can survive that dominance without translating survival into a clear advantage, then neither side has actually achieved what war is supposed to achieve. The ceasefire suggests that both sides arrived at a temporary pause, not through victory, but through a mutual recognition, whether publicly acknowledged or not, that the cost of continuation would increase costs without guaranteeing a better outcome, even if both sides don't fully agree on the terms or on how the pause actually happened. So, the 2-week ceasefire should not be mistaken as a symbol of victory for either side. It is a signal of constraint. In fact, some analysts are already saying this, and I tend to agree with them. This is why the debate about whether wars can be won from the skies becomes so relevant. US air power, as this conflict has once again demonstrated, is unmatched in its ability to degrade. But degradation is only the top layer of war. It does not, by itself, establish control over what comes next. Without ground presence and without mechanisms to verify, enforce, and stabilize, degradation does not translate into real control. Again, survival, as Iran has demonstrated, is not victory either. Avoiding collapse may prevent defeat, but that does not automatically produce a good strategic outcome. Survival keeps you in the game. It does not mean you are winning it. What this leaves us with is something less satisfying than a clear answer, but more accurate. This was not a war with winners. It was a war of limits. It revealed the limit of air power, which can dominate the battlefield without being able to close the war. At this stage, it is increasingly clear that the US cannot convert air superiority into a final conclusion. It also revealed the limit of resistance, as seen in Iran's ability to absorb sustained pressure without translating resistance into a clear advantage. And perhaps most importantly, it revealed the limit of escalation itself, the point at which both sides, despite their rhetoric and capability, are forced to step back, not because victory has been achieved, but because the path forward offers diminishing returns at rising costs. Undoubtedly, both sides demonstrated strength, absorbed significant costs, and still walked away with their core challenges unresolved. And that, to me, is not victory. It is constrained because in this kind of triadic conflict, winning in the traditional sense was never really on the table.